This case takes place in the United Kingdom on the 23rd of February 2016. Paul Jefferies was a 52-year-old man who lived in Mayfeild in the UK. He worked for the Revenue and Customs as a policy advisor on taxation. Those who knew Paul held him in high regard. He was described as a shy and private man. Paul was not very close with any of his family members. He was a gay man and his family refused to accept him. And after breaking up with his long-term partner, he moved from London to Sussex, purchasing a cottage in the village of Mayfeild and commuted to London for his job. Now single, Paul used the dating app Grindr in hopes of meeting someone. It's on this dating app that he got talking to a teenager named Ben Bamford. To sign up to dating apps, you have to be at least aged 18 or older. So at first, it's plausible to presume that Paul may have believed that Ben was at least 18, when in reality, Ben was 15. The two began conversing on the app, and according to those who later analysed the messages between the two, Ben aimed to use Paul Jefferies to extract money from him. In one message exchange, Ben asked Paul for £10. In the summer of 2014, the two met. Over a period of several weeks, the two likely engaged in intimate activities a number of times. These meetings came to an end a few days before Ben would turn 16. Ben sent a message to Paul, thanking him for being kind to him and telling him that he had enjoyed their meetings, but Ben told Paul that he was not gay. Paul replied saying that he too had enjoyed meeting him and hoped that he helped to clarify things for him. He told Ben to feel free to contact him anytime about anything. It is widely accepted that Paul must have known that Ben was under the age of 18, as Ben was attending school when he met him over the summer of 2014. He was studying for school exams and was living at home with his parents. However, according to court documents, Ben never told him his real age and never mentioned that he was still under the age of 16. Although many have argued that Paul may have indeed known the age of Ben and still chose to continue seeing him. After Ben messaged Paul telling him that they should no longer meet, they stopped talking for some time. In the year 2015, Ben had gotten involved with illegal substances, mainly Valium. He was using and selling these substances. However, his use had far exceeded the amount he made from selling, and so he started using some of the supply he was supposed to sell. His parents found out about his involvement with these illegal activities, and they tried their best to help sort Ben out, but he rejected their concerns and offers of help. Ben then got into debt with his supplier due to him using too much. His mother offered to help settle the debt under the condition that he stop his involvements following the payment, but Ben refused. The person who supplied Ben had amped up the pressure to settle his debt, something that seemed to cause Ben some serious stress. It was on the 23rd of December 2015, 17 months after their last encounter, that Ben reached out to Paul again. Ben, who was now 17 at this point, made his way over to Paul's home and he stayed the night there. Ben and Paul were again in contact with each other. On the 23rd of February 2016, the time had come to pay the supplier and to settle the debt. The debt was around £400, but Ben did not have the money to give. Ben then came up with the idea of contacting Paul with the hopes of being able to get the money from him. It was on this day that he messaged Paul asking him if he was free to meet up that night. Paul came and picked up Ben, but before he had gotten there, Ben consumed some Valium. The two arrived at Paul's home, made their way upstairs, and removed their clothing. From evidence that was later recovered, the two began being intimate with each other. What actually caused the series of events from this point onwards is open to speculation. According to Ben, he didn't want to go the full way, but Paul had other ideas. Ben asked Paul to stop, but Paul didn't listen and continued to force himself upon Ben. Ben said at this point that he became scared. He told Paul that he needed to stop as he had to go to the toilet right away. It is at this point that Paul is supposed to have stopped and allowed Ben to go to the toilet, but Ben claimed that this was a lie. He just wanted to get away from the situation so he could leave Paul's home. He went to the front door to get away, but according to Ben, he panicked upon realizing that the door was locked. He said he frantically searched for a key but was unable to locate one, so instead, he went to the kitchen and he grabbed a small knife. He turned around and made his way back up the stairs where Paul was lying in bed. Ben says that he picked up the knife in the kitchen in case he needed to ward off any further unwanted advances from Paul. Ben entered the bedroom and Paul was lying on the bed. He turned around to see Ben holding the knife. In an instant, Ben lunged forwards towards Paul and stabbed him over and over again. Just how many times isn't exactly clear, but the crime scene analysis concluded that the attack was extremely violent. Paul managed to get up. He was bleeding profusely, but he managed to make his way downstairs into the living room, and Ben followed closely behind. Paul picked up the landline phone and attempted to call for help, but Ben grabbed him and slammed his head against the wall twice, resulting in Paul falling to the ground. Ben then picked up a candle holder and hit Paul in the head multiple times. At this point, Paul had lost a significant amount of blood. However, he was very much still alive. He managed to get into the kitchen of the home, but it's here where Ben rummaged for a serrated bread knife and walked over to where Paul was crawling on the floor. Ben slashed his throat with a blade a number of times, severing his windpipe and jugular vein. But Ben was not quite done yet. He retrieved another knife and proceeded to plunge the blade into Paul's neck again and again, and slashed his back a number of times too. In total, Ben inflicted in excess of 40 knife wounds to the head and body of Paul, and he did so with at least 3 different blades. There were stab wounds to Paul's face, the right eye, and his forehead, and his kidney and spleen had been penetrated. The overall attack lasted several minutes, during which time Paul was conscious. When Ben realized what he had done, he was shocked and disturbed. Paul was still alive after all of this and was barely clinging on to life. Ben grabbed a tea towel and placed it over his head and shoulders as he lay dying on the floor, so he didn't have to look at Paul's face during his final moments. During the frenzied attack, Ben had injured himself, receiving a deep wound at the base of his right thumb, which severed several tendons. Due to the blood, the blade had slipped in his hand as he brought the blade down upon Paul. His hand slipped from the handle all the way down to the blade. Ben realized that he was bleeding quite a lot. He went upstairs and got dressed. He then began looking for Paul's car and house keys, which he was able to find this time. He left the home, locked the door behind him, and hopped into Paul's Audi TT. Whilst driving, Ben pulled out his mobile phone and began calling some of his close friends, telling them that he was on his way to come and pick them up. He told them that he had injured himself and needed medical attention as soon as possible. He managed to persuade a friend and his girlfriend to come to the hospital with him. He told the hospital staff that he had inflicted these injuries to himself and he was treated. When he was in the hospital bed, Ben asked his girlfriend to take a photo of him, which is the image on screen now. When he was discharged 2 days later, Ben told his father about the debt he was in to his supplier, and his father gave him the money to settle the debt. After being let out of the hospital, Ben realized that he had left his coat inside of Paul's house. With his friends, Ben got back into Paul's car that he had stolen from him and drove back to the scene of the crime. However, he was horrified to discover that the police were already there. Paul had of course not shown up for work, and his colleagues had noticed his absence. They tried to contact him, but to no avail. Worried about his well-being, they made a call to the police and requested that they carry out a welfare check. When the police arrived, they found the door to be locked. They knocked on the door, but there was no response, so they decided to break into Paul's home, only to discover the horrific crime scene. Blood was quite literally all over the home, and it was clear that a violent struggle had taken place. They found Paul in the kitchen with extreme injuries, and got to work right away to find the culprit. Upon seeing the police at Paul's home, Ben panicked and fled from the scene in Paul's car. After Ben left hospital, his mother became rather suspicious about the injuries he had sustained and did not believe that he had done it to himself. Ben then told his mother a different story, saying that he had been attacked by some man and that he had told the hospital he had done it to himself so the police would not get involved. But she was worried about who this man was. She spoke to her son again and told him to tell the truth. When recalling that moment, Ben's mother said, "He asked me to leave his room and he became quite upset. He got tearful and angry and smashed a mirror. I kept saying to him that I needed to know what's happening, and then he shouted, 'I think I've killed somebody.' I had to ask him again what he said because I was in disbelief. He then again said, 'I think I killed somebody.' He then went onto his bed and laid there face down, very upset and very tearful." Ben's mother said that she was left dumbfounded by what her son had admitted to, and they laid and cuddled on his bed. Ben told his mother that he had gone to Paul's house to get some money, and that he had first met him online when he was just 15, but that Paul had forced himself upon him. He said that he was trying to get away, and that there was a struggle, which resulted in Paul being killed. Ben's mother, still in some form of disbelief, looked online and read the details about the murder, and saw that Ben was telling her the truth. She then told her son that they had to go to the police station, and he said, "Yes, I know." Ben, along with his parents, went to the police station, and there he was questioned, arrested, and charged. Detective Chief Inspector Tanya Jones, who led the investigation, said, "This was a horrific attack by a teenage boy who preyed on his victim with the aim of exploiting him for money. The level of violence he inflicted on Paul Jefferies was extreme, and then he fled the scene in the victim's car. He showed no remorse, smirking in a photograph just hours later. Although some have argued that Ben is also a victim in this case, due to what happened when he was 15 and what he alleged Paul did to him that night. The trial would soon begin, but before this would happen, Ben's mental state was evaluated to see if he was suffering from any mental health issues that could explain the violent attack. However, the professionals found Ben sound of mind. Ben told the psychologist that he did not feel sorry for Paul at all, although he did say that he regretted what he had done. It's reported that throughout the trial, Ben showed no real remorse. Ben's mother broke down in tears as she told the jurors the sequence of events that led up to her son telling her that he was a murderer. Ben pleaded not guilty to murder, and his defense rested upon his claims that the crime was a result of an excusable loss of control, which should reduce the murder to manslaughter, but the jury rejected that defense. Ben was found guilty and convicted by the jury after a 2-week trial. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. After he serves his time, a parole board will have to decide whether or not he is capable of being released. Ben will also remain on license for the rest of his life.